Hello everyone and welcome back to Jimmy Talks Jira. As you know, in the Atlassian community, it is Migrations Month. And given that I have experience doing a Jira server to cloud migration in the past, I thought I'd take some time this week to talk a little bit about my experiences and share some tips and tricks that I have for helping you be successful at doing a migration. Now, when it comes to migrations, there's not a whole lot I can show. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have an article up in Confluence that shows some of what I'm talking about, and we'll just talk through it. All right, let's dive in. All right, so as a bit of a bonus, you're going to get a bit of a behind the scenes as to how I write articles on the online community. I am planning on writing this as an article. This video will be attached to that article, so you get the best of both worlds of being able to watch my video of me doing this, as well as just read through and follow the links on your own time if your preference is to read things. So, without any further ado, I'm just going to start with, if you would like to see the sort of thought process as I was doing the migration, this article here is one of the first articles I wrote. It was a 3-part series. This one specifically is on the how we did the migration, our successes, our failures, everything that went along with that. I will preface this with, these are my experiences. The company that I did this for was about 115 users. We only had about 5 or 6 projects, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40,000 issues, and we had very few apps installed on our instance, so it was a relatively small vanilla installation compared to what some people might have out there. Also, these tips are in no particular order. I think that they're all very important things to look at. So without further ado, let's get in and start talking about it. So number one, you're going to want to look at authentication. If you've been using your Jira server for a while now, you will probably be aware that you can have the internal directory or connected to LDAP, and your usernames could be something like your first initial and last name, like Jay Sudden for myself. Or it could be something else. When you're going to be using the cloud products, by default, you will be using Atlassian ID. You can use Atlassian Access, and I'll get to that in a second, to connect to your other identity providers, but Atlassian Access is going to key off of email address. This is super important. At the time I did the migration, we had to manually edit the users table of our Jira server backup to switch all of our usernames from first initial last name to email address in order for them to be brought over and read correctly so that we maintained proper user history. I don't know if that's still the same today. I highly recommend going into the Migration Center and taking a look and trying the migration yourself to see what happens. When it comes to Atlassian Access, that is the cloud equivalent to Crowd. And it is also the only way that you can connect a third-party identity provider, being it, Active Directory, Google, Okta, any of those identity platforms. So what you're going to have to be aware of with Atlassian Access is that there is an additional cost, but it does allow SSO, so single sign-on authentication, as well as a bit more control over your users within your organization. There is so much more I can talk about on Atlassian Access that will be a separate video on its own in the future. There are tons of questions people ask regularly about it, so I'm not going to dive too far into that today. We will make that a whole separate video. Expect that coming soon. Just be aware that authentication is going to change going from server to cloud, and you're going to need to look at what option works best for you and your company, and do a fair bit of investigation into how to make that work ahead of going to cloud, because you're going to want to set that up from day one, as opposed to trying to make it work while you're, once you've got everyone in. Number 2, clean up your data. This is probably the first thing that I would recommend tackling because it's not directly related to the migration. However, cleaning up your data is going to immensely help you during your migration. The less you bring with you to the cloud, the faster your migration is going to be, and the leaner your instance is going to be when you start. I can't stress enough how beneficial it is to just do that tidying ahead of time, as opposed to saying, oh, we'll take care of it when we get there. I know I hate putting off cleaning the house and cleaning my room, and I know that if you don't just do it when you have a perfect opportunity, like ahead of a cloud migration, this is the best time to start doing that stuff. So what you're going to want to look at is old projects that you don't really need the issue data from, any custom fields that aren't being used, old backups of workflows, workflow scheme configurations that aren't being used, anything that can be cleaned up. I highly recommend you do it ahead of the migration. Number 3, this should go without saying. I know a number of people have talked about validating that there are cloud versions of apps for anything that you have installed on your server instance. I would also recommend going one step further, though. It's not just enough to make sure that there is a cloud app, but also that the functionality works the same as what you are used to in server. Cloud uses REST API calls, whereas the server has access to Java APIs as well. And there just isn't quite the depth at this point in the API offerings of the cloud versus what's on server. To that end, if you have custom API calling scripts, you're going to want to make sure that you can still access the things that you want to. If you're using the Java API today, you want to make sure that there are cloud REST API equivalents to what you're using, so that you will continue to be able to use that, or you'll at least be able to update your scripts as necessary to be able to continue that functionality working. In addition, I would just recommend trying out the cloud environment. So not necessarily making sure that your data comes across correctly, but try out the features that are in cloud. There are some differences between the server and cloud versions. There are some significant additions to the cloud versions, but there are also some things that are missing from cloud that server does offer. And I would make sure that there's nothing that's going to be a showstopper for your company in migrating to the cloud, that if there was something missing, you just wouldn't be able to use the cloud products. So do all of that. Make sure you've done your due diligence, that things are going to work the way you want them to, and you should be good. Leading into that, number 4 is recruit a beta testing group. This was extremely helpful to myself. Pretty much the entire company, when I did this migration, was using Jira to track their work. And I recruited a cross-functional team from a bunch of different departments. We did a migration of our production data, and we asked our user group to do their daily work. I may have set up all of their workflows for them, but they are more experts on how to use them from a day-to-day basis. And you won't understand just the benefits of having them try things out and let you know what they do and don't like about things. It's super helpful. At the same time, we were able to find a couple of things that were bugs we had to account for during the migration. But what we found more of is that there was just things we needed to document and train our users on as to the differences between the way in which server and cloud function. And that was super helpful to have that information up front, as opposed to having done our production migration and the users have a poor experience when they first start using it. We were able to set up some documentation. We were able to train people ahead of, or I should say, during the first couple of days of things being live, we held user training sessions to help them with those sorts of things. Leading into the last one, I've said it a lot today, but I can't stress it enough. Test, test, test. And that's not just testing that your data is functioning the way you want. Test the migration. If you read through the article that I posted, you will find that our first attempt was actually a failure. And the reason for that was we ran the migration once, we thought it was successful, and then we just started testing with that single test of having done the migration. When we went to do it live, we got different results than what was happening in the first time. And we figured out some of the things that were going wrong as a result of that. During the second week, we tested ad nauseum. So we'd run a migration, we would check how long it took, we would make sure that what we were seeing logged was what we were expecting to see. We ran a small validation suite, and then we wiped everything clean and ran the migration again. By the end of the week, I was sick of running migrations, but I was extremely confident that what we were going to do was predictable and was going to be successful, and it was successful. As a bonus tip, have a solid rollback plan. We did have a failure, but our rollback plan was extremely smooth. Our user base didn't even know that anything had gone wrong until we made a notification that we had rolled back, and we were able to test again and do our production one, which was also smooth. So there was zero data loss, zero user interruption. Those are the two key points I would try and accomplish as a part of your rollback plan. So I know I've just dumped a whole bunch of information at you. It's a lot to take in all at once, but these are sort of some of the things that I would recommend being aware of while you're doing the migration. I know that if you're just starting to look into this, it is going to be extremely overwhelming. You don't even know where to start. I would recommend just taking a breath, going through the Migration Center. They have a lot of step-by-steps of how to plan things. Just take it one piece at a time. It's going to take some time to get everything aligned to the point where you're ready to do the migration. But I promise it will get easier as you start going through things. And I know that you can be successful. It just takes a little bit of time, patience, and energy. I hope that this has been something that will help people. I hope you found this video useful and insightful. And if you have further questions, feel free to reach out to me either in the comments below or on the article in the online community. And I highly recommend you check out the link in the description. This coming Thursday, there's going to be a live webinar panel of migration experts from the Atlassian community on Thursday, January 20th at 9 a.m. Pacific time. They will be answering any and all questions you have, as well as sharing their experiences performing the migrations themselves. Thank you once again for joining, and have a great day.